The keyboard beneath my fingers felt sticky from the cheap coffee I'd spilled an hour ago, each keystroke producing a faint tacky sound that grated against my already frayed nerves. I'd been at my desk since 6 this morning, and the clock now mocked me with its cruel announcement of 3 in the afternoon. My shoulders burned with that deep ache that came from hunching over spreadsheets and contracts. My eyes felt like someone had replaced them with sandpaper, and my lower back throbbed with each breath. This was my life now. Secretary to Blake Caruso, one of the most powerful men in the city, though his official business card said nothing about the empire of fear and loyalty he'd built beneath the surface of legitimate real estate holdings and import businesses. I'd known what I was getting into when I took this job 8 months ago. Desperate times, desperate measures, and all that. But knowing something intellectually and living it daily were 2 very different things. Miss Morgan. His voice cut through my concentration like a blade, smooth and controlled, with just a hint of his grandfather's Italian accent wrapped around certain vowels. My office. Now. I didn't jump. I'd learned early on that showing fear or surprise around Blake Caruso was like bleeding in shark-infested waters. Instead, I saved my work with deliberate calm, smoothed down my pencil skirt, and gathered the files I suspected he'd want. The executive suite of Caruso Holdings occupied the entire top floor of the building, all glass and steel and expensive Italian marble. My desk sat in the outer office, a sentinel position where I controlled access to Blake's inner sanctum. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind me, the city sprawled like a conquered territory, and I'd learned to read Blake's mood by which part of his domain he stared at during our meetings. I knocked once, a formality since he'd summoned me, and pushed open the heavy door. Blake sat behind his massive desk, backlit by the afternoon sun in a way that made him look like some dark angel. At 32, he had the kind of looks that made grown women stupid and smart women careful. Sharp jawline that could cut glass, dark hair styled with just enough product to look effortless, and eyes the color of storm clouds that missed absolutely nothing. He wore his power the way other men wore cologne, an invisible but undeniable presence that changed the very air in a room. The Castellano contracts, he said without preamble, not bothering with pleasantries. We'd moved past those months ago. Where are we? I set the files on his desk, keeping my movements efficient. Marco Castellano signed this morning. His attorney tried to renegotiate the waterfront terms, but I reminded him of our previous agreement's termination clause. He backed down. Blake's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close enough to count as approval from him. Good. And the other matter? The other matter. He meant the surveillance reports on the rival family that had been sniffing around his territory. I'd organized them by date and location, color-coded the key individuals, and created a summary that even someone without Blake's strategic mind could follow. On your desk since this morning, I replied, gesturing to a red folder I'd placed in his priority stack. 3 confirmed sightings near the docks, 2 possible approaches to your restaurant managers, and 1 very interesting meeting between Vincent Romano and a city councilman who should know better. Should I be impressed that my secretary has better intelligence than my actual security team? There was something dangerous in his tone, a warning wrapped in velvet. Your security team gathers the intelligence, Mr. Caruso. I just organize it in a way that doesn't waste your time. I kept my voice level, professional, the perfect, efficient secretary who knew her place. His eyes narrowed fractionally, and I knew he was trying to decide if I was being subtly insolent or genuinely useful. This was our dance, had been for months. He pushed. I pushed back just enough to be interesting, but not enough to be insubordinate. And somewhere in that tension, we'd developed a working relationship that was more effective than it had any right to be. Anything else I should know? He asked, leaning back in his chair with a casualness that fooled absolutely no one. Blake Caruso was never truly relaxed. Even in repose, there was a coiled energy about him, like a predator deciding whether to pounce or wait. Bryce finished the security assessment for the new property, I said, consulting my mental checklist. He'll have the full report by end of day, but he stopped by earlier to say everything looks clean. No structural concerns, no obvious surveillance points, good sightlines for... Bryce stopped by? Blake's voice had gone very quiet, and I felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. Yes, around noon. And what did you think of Bryce's visit, Miss Morgan? The way he said my name, with just a hint of emphasis, made warning bells go off in my head. But I'd already started down this path, and Blake hated when people backtracked or hedged. I think he's very thorough in his work, I said carefully. Professional, competent. He's so handsome too, isn't he? The words came out before I could stop them, my brain apparently deciding that honesty was the best policy at the exact wrong moment. I mean, objectively speaking, very symmetrical features. The silence that followed was absolute. I watched Blake's expression transform, something dark and possessive sliding behind his eyes like a shark's nictitating membrane. Symmetrical features, he repeated, his voice deadly soft. How observant of you. I swallowed hard, suddenly aware that I'd made a terrible mistake. You simply meant that you find my head of security attractive enough to comment on. Blake rose from his chair, with that fluid grace that always reminded me how dangerous he really was. Tell me, Miss Morgan, do you often evaluate my employees' physical attributes? Should I be concerned about your professionalism? Heat flooded my face, equal parts embarrassment and anger. That's not what Or perhaps, he continued, moving around the desk toward me with measured steps. You're simply being honest, which I normally appreciate. But in this case, your honesty is problematic. He stopped close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive with notes of leather and spice, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact, refusing to show the fear that was definitely there beneath my irritation. Problematic how? I asked, proud that my voice didn't shake. I'm not allowed to acknowledge when someone is conventionally attractive? You're allowed to do whatever you like, Miss Morgan. His smile was all teeth, no warmth. Just as I'm allowed to be displeased when my secretary spends her time admiring my security personnel instead of focusing on her work. I was literally just delivering his message, I protested, my temper finally overriding my sense of self-preservation. I didn't ask him to stop by. I didn't linger to admire his symmetrical features. I was being polite and professional, which is apparently a crime in your presence. Careful. The single word held volumes of warning. You're dangerously close to being insubordinate. And you're being dangerously close to being irrational, I shot back, then immediately regretted it as his eyes flashed with something that looked almost like fury. Mr. Caruso, sir, I apologize. That was inappropriate. Was it? He leaned in closer, and I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Or was it honest? You seem to value honesty so highly, Bella. Let's be honest now. Do you find Bryce attractive? The use of my first name, which he rarely did, sent a shiver down my spine that I absolutely refused to analyze. I find my job attractive, I said firmly. I find my paycheck attractive. I find not being unemployed attractive. Bryce's face has absolutely nothing to do with any of that. Then why mention it at all? Because I have a functioning pair of eyes? The words escaped before I could stop them, and I watched Blake's jaw tighten dangerously. Sir, look, I'm sorry if my observation offended you. It was unprofessional and unnecessary, and it won't happen again. No, he agreed, his voice dropping to that dangerous register that made smart people very nervous. It won't. Because from now on, Miss Morgan, you'll be staying much closer to me, where I can keep an eye on exactly what and who you're observing. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means you're being promoted. His smile was sharp enough to cut. Congratulations. You're now my personal assistant. Not just my secretary, but my shadow. Everywhere I go, you go. Every meeting I have, you attend. Every decision I make, you document. Consider it a reward for your excellent organizational skills. That's not a promotion, that's a... I caught myself before saying, prison sentence. A what, Miss Morgan? He raised an eyebrow, daring me to finish. A significant increase in responsibility, I managed, for which I assume there will be a corresponding increase in compensation. Something flickered in his eyes, amusement maybe, or respect for my audacity in negotiating when I clearly had no leverage. Double your current salary, plus expenses, plus accommodations when we travel. Travel? My voice came out higher than I intended. I have business in Chicago next week, then Miami, then overseas in a month. You'll accompany me to all of it. He moved back to his desk, effectively dismissing my protests before I could voice them. Consider it an education in how my empire actually functions. All of it. The emphasis on all of it made my blood run cold. He wasn't just talking about the legitimate businesses. He was pulling back the curtain on everything, forcing me deeper into his world than I'd ever intended to go. And if I refuse? I asked quietly, though we both knew the answer. Blake looked up from the papers he was reviewing, his expression almost gentle. Almost. Then I'll accept your resignation with regret and provide you with an excellent reference for your next position. But Bella, there was my first name again, loaded with meaning. You should know that I'm a possessive man. What's mine stays mine, and whether you've realized it yet or not, you became mine the moment you walked through that door 8 months ago and impressed me enough to hire you. I'm not yours, I whispered, but even I could hear the lack of conviction in my voice. Aren't you? He smiled then, and it was the most dangerous expression I'd ever seen on his face. We'll see. You start your new position tomorrow, 6 a.m. We have an early meeting with the Castellanos. Dress professionally, but impressively. You're representing me now, which means you represent power. Don't disappoint me. I turned to leave, my mind reeling from everything that had just happened, when his voice stopped me at the door. And Bella? One more thing. I looked back, waiting. Stay away from Bryce. That's not a request. The possessiveness in his tone made something flutter in my stomach that I absolutely refused to examine. I nodded once and escaped to my desk, my hands shaking as I sank into my chair. What had I done? One thoughtless comment about a handsome face, and I'd somehow triggered something in Blake Caruso that felt far more dangerous than his usual cold professionalism. The way he'd looked at me, with that dark intensity, hadn't been the look of a boss annoyed with his secretary. It had been the look of a man who'd just realized something he wanted. And Blake Caruso always got what he wanted. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Welcome to your new position. Don't be late tomorrow. BC. I stared at the message, then at the closed door of his office, and wondered if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life, or if this was somehow exactly where I was meant to be. Either way, there was no going back now. 6 a.m. came far too early, especially since I'd spent most of the night tossing and turning, alternating between rehearsing professional responses to Blake's inevitable provocations and trying not to think about the way his voice had dropped when he'd called me his. I dressed carefully, choosing a charcoal gray suit with a fitted blazer that said, competent professional, while the pencil skirt whispered, but still feminine. My dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, minimal makeup, simple jewelry. The goal was to blend into the background of power, not compete with it. The Caruso Holdings building was nearly empty at this hour, just security and the cleaning crew finishing their night shift. My heels echoed off the marble floors as I rode the elevator up, my stomach tight with an anxiety I refused to name. Blake was already in his office, which somehow didn't surprise me. He looked like he'd been there for hours, his desk covered in documents and his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that I absolutely was not noticing. He glanced up when I entered, his gray eyes sweeping over me in an assessment that felt almost physical. "Good. You're on time." He stood, buttoning his cuffs and reaching for his jacket. "We're meeting the Castellanos at their social club. Marco likes to conduct business on his territory. It's a power play, but I'm allowing it because I want something from him." "What do you want?" I asked, following him to the private elevator. "Access to his shipping routes." Blake adjusted his tie without looking at a mirror, the gesture so practiced it was almost unconscious. "He controls 70% of the maritime traffic through the port. If I want to expand my import operations legitimately, I need his cooperation." "And illegitimately?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Blake's lips curved slightly. "Quick as always. Yes, there are other considerations, but those don't concern you. Your job is to take notes, look impressive, and keep your mouth shut unless I specifically ask you something." "How refreshing," I muttered. I thought my new position came with actual responsibilities. "It does." He held the elevator door open for me with exaggerated courtesy. "Your responsibility is to do exactly what I say, when I say it, without question or commentary. Think you can manage that?" I stepped into the elevator, biting back the sharp retort that wanted to escape. Blake followed, and suddenly the spacious elevator felt impossibly small. He stood close, closer than necessary, and I caught that scent again. Leather and spice, and something darker that was pure him. "I can manage anything you throw at me, Mr. Caruso." I kept my eyes forward, watching the floor numbers descend. "We'll see." His voice was soft, almost intimate. "Though I have to admit, I'm curious how long you'll last before that sharp tongue gets you into trouble." "I've lasted 8 months so far." "That was different. You were just my secretary. Now you're mine in a much more comprehensive way." He leaned in slightly, his breath warm against my ear. "And I take care of what's mine, Bella. But I also expect absolute loyalty, absolute obedience. Can you give me that?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "That depends on what you're asking me to do." "Everything." The elevator doors opened onto the parking garage, and he stepped out without waiting for my response, leaving me to follow in his wake like a satellite caught in a planet's gravity. The car waiting for us wasn't Blake's usual sleek Mercedes. This was something else entirely. An armored SUV, with windows tinted so dark they looked like solid panels of obsidian. The driver who opened the door wasn't Marco, Blake's usual driver, but a man I'd never seen before. Tall, built like a tank, with cold eyes that assessed and dismissed me in the same glance. "This is Vincent," Blake said as I slid into the back seat. "He'll be our driver and additional security for the foreseeable future." "What happened to Marco?" I asked, then immediately regretted the question when I saw Blake's expression darken. "Marco is handling other matters." His tone made it clear the subject was closed. The drive to the Castellano Social Club took us through parts of the city I'd only ever seen from a distance. Old neighborhoods where the buildings leaned together like conspirators, and the street signs were in Italian as often as English. This was the part of the city where Blake's world operated most openly, where everyone knew who really ran things, and the police learned long ago to look the other way. The social club itself was an unassuming brick building sandwiched between a bakery and a restaurant. No sign, no indication of what lay behind the heavy wooden door. But the men standing outside in their expensive suits and watchful eyes told the real story. They nodded respectfully as Blake approached, one of them opening the door without being asked. Inside, the club was all dark wood and leather, the kind of place where deals were made over espresso and cigars, where loyalty was currency, and betrayal was death. Marco Castellano waited for us in a private room at the back. He was older than Blake by perhaps 20 years, with silver threading through his dark hair and the kind of face that had seen everything and been surprised by nothing. 2 men flanked him, bodyguards who watched our entrance with professional detachment. "Blake." Marco rose, extending a hand. "Punctual as always, and you've brought company. This must be the famous Miss Morgan I've been hearing about." I froze. He'd been hearing about me? From whom? "My new personal assistant," Blake said smoothly, his hand settling on the small of my back in a gesture that looked professional, but felt like a brand. "She'll be sitting in on our business discussions going forward. Bella, this is Marco Castellano." I extended my hand, and Marco took it with old-world courtesy, bringing it briefly to his lips in a gesture that would have been charming if not for the calculating look in his eyes. "Charming?" he said, releasing my hand. "And beautiful. You always did have excellent taste, Blake. Miss Morgan is here for her organizational skills, not her appearance." Blake's voice had gone very soft, very dangerous. "Shall we discuss business?" The meeting that followed was a masterclass in controlled aggression disguised as polite negotiation. They discussed shipping routes and port access, tariffs and timing, all while circling each other like boxers looking for an opening. I took notes on my tablet, documenting everything while trying to decode the subtext beneath every word. Blake wanted Marco's shipping routes. Marco wanted something in return, though he danced around naming it explicitly. There were references to mutual interests and shared concerns, mentions of families I didn't recognize, and territories I couldn't map. And through it all, I felt eyes on me. Not Blake's eyes, though his attention never strayed far. Someone else. I glanced up during a pause in conversation and caught one of Marco's bodyguards staring at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. When our eyes met, he didn't look away. Instead, he smiled slightly, a predator's recognition of prey. Blake noticed. I saw his posture shift infinitesimally, his shoulders squaring just a fraction. When he spoke again, there was steel beneath the silk. "I believe we're done here, Marco. My terms are generous and you know it. Take a day to consider, then give me your answer. But don't take too long. My patience has limits." As does mine. Marco stood, the gesture bringing his bodyguards to attention. Though I have to say, Blake, bringing such a lovely distraction to a business meeting is either very confident or very foolish. Some might see her as a weakness. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. "Let them try," Blake said softly. "They'll quickly learn the difference between weakness and what I'm willing to destroy to protect." The threat hung in the air between them, naked and undeniable. Marco's eyes flickered to me, then back to Blake, and something like understanding crossed his face. "I see. Well then, you'll have my answer tomorrow." He nodded to me. "A pleasure, Miss Morgan. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other." Blake's hand tightened on my back, steering me toward the door before I could respond. Vincent was waiting with the SUV, and we were inside and moving before I could process what had just happened. "What was that about?" I asked, once we were clear of the neighborhood. Why did Marco look at me like that? And his bodyguard? "You're asking the wrong questions." Blake's voice was tight, with barely controlled anger. "The right question is why Marco knows anything about you at all. Why he's been hearing things about my secretary. How should I know? Because someone has been paying attention to you. Someone has been asking questions. And that means someone sees you as relevant to me, which makes you a target." My blood ran cold. A target for what? For leverage. He turned to face me fully, and the intensity in his eyes made me press back against the leather seat. This is what I was afraid of. The moment you become known as someone I value, you become a weapon that can be used against me. I'm not... You don't... I struggled to form a coherent argument. You barely know me. I'm just your secretary. your assistant, whatever. You think that matters? His laugh was humorless. You think these people care about the truth? They see you at my side. They see me react when someone looks at you the wrong way. They see me threaten violence when Marco suggests you might be a weakness. That's all the truth they need. So what do? We? He studied me for a long moment. We make sure you're protected. Vincent will be your driver from now on. When I'm in meetings, you'll have additional security. And he pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. You're moving. Moving? Moving where? One of my properties. A secured building with 24-hour security. You'll have your own apartment, fully furnished, no rent. Consider it a benefit of your new position. You can't just move me. I can. And I am. His tone brooked no argument. Your current apartment building has no security, Bella. The locks are a joke. A child could break in. You're vulnerable there, which means you're a liability to me. I'm not your responsibility, I protested weakly. Yes, you are. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. The moment you became mine, and don't argue, we both know you are, you became my responsibility. Your safety, your security, your life. All of it. Mine to protect. This is insane. This is reality, my reality, and now yours too. He sat back, his expression softening slightly. I know it's overwhelming, but I meant what I said yesterday. I protect what's mine, and I don't half-ass anything, Bella. If you're going to be in my life, you're going to be safe. Non-negotiable. I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him he was being ridiculous, possessive, controlling. But the memory of that bodyguard's predatory stare stopped me. Blake's world was dangerous in ways I'd only glimpsed from behind my secretary's desk. Now I was being pulled into the center of it, whether I wanted to be or not. When do I move? I asked quietly. Tonight. Vincent will take you to pack what you need. The rest will be handled by my people. He checked his phone. We have 3 more meetings today. Then tomorrow we fly to Chicago. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and negotiations, Blake's hand on my back becoming as constant as breathing. Every time someone's eyes lingered on me too long, I felt his grip tighten. Every time I spoke, answering a question he'd directed at me, I felt his attention sharpen with something that looked disturbingly like pride. And through it all, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Not by Blake, not by his enemies, by something else. Someone else. A presence in the shadows that made my skin prickle with unease. By the time we returned to the office that evening, exhaustion had settled into my bones. But Blake wasn't done. One more thing before you go, he said, pulling a small box from his desk drawer. Wear this tomorrow. I opened it to find a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant, a stylized C that I recognized as his family crest. So, everyone knows, he said softly, taking it from the box and moving behind me. That you're under my protection, that you're mine. His fingers brushed the nape of my neck as he fastened the clasp, the touch sending electricity down my spine. When I turned to face him, he was close enough that I could count his eyelashes, close enough to see the storm brewing in his gray eyes. I'm not yours, I whispered, but the words had no force behind them. Keep telling yourself that, Bella. His thumb traced my jawline. Eventually, you'll stop lying to both of us. He stepped back before I could respond, leaving me standing there with his claim around my neck and his words burning in my ears. As Vincent drove me to pack my belongings, I touched the necklace and wondered when exactly I'd stopped being Bella Morgan, independent woman, and started becoming Bella, Blake Caruso's possession. And worse, why some part of me didn't mind as much as I should. The apartment Blake had arranged for me was nothing like my cramped studio with its perpetually dripping faucet and temperamental heating. This was a penthouse unit in one of the most exclusive buildings downtown, all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture that probably cost more than I made in a year. My entire life fit into 3 suitcases, which Vincent carried up without comment, while 2 of Blake's security team swept the apartment for threats I couldn't even imagine. "Mr. Caruso wants you to know the panic button is here," one of them said, pointing to a discreet button near the bed. "And here," another by the front door. "And here," a third in the bathroom. "Press any of them, and we're here in under 30 seconds. How reassuring, I muttered, but the sarcasm felt hollow. The truth was, I was terrified. That bodyguard's stare at Marco's club had shaken something loose in me, made me realize just how exposed I'd been all these months, how vulnerable. After they left, I stood at the window looking out at the city lights and touched the necklace Blake had given me. The gold was warm against my skin, or maybe that was just my imagination. Either way, I couldn't seem to take it off. My phone buzzed. Blake, of course. "Everything satisfactory?" "It's a gilded cage," I texted back before I could stop myself. His response was immediate. "Better than a cage made of bones. Sleep well, Bella. 6 a.m. again tomorrow." I should have been angry at his presumption, at the way he'd rearranged my entire life in a matter of hours. Instead, I felt something else. Something dangerously close to gratitude, or safety, or something I absolutely refused to examine too closely. Sleep didn't come easily. Every sound in the unfamiliar apartment made me jump. And when I finally drifted off, my dreams were filled with storm-gray eyes and dangerous promises. The flight to Chicago the next morning was on Blake's private jet, because of course it was. The interior was all cream leather and polished wood, with a conference area where Blake worked while I sat across from him, ostensibly reviewing documents, but mostly trying not to stare at the way his shirt pulled across his shoulders when he reached for his coffee. "You're thinking too loud," he said, without looking up from his laptop. "Excuse me? Whatever question you're trying not to ask, just ask it." He closed the laptop and gave me his full attention, which was always slightly overwhelming. "We have 3 hours. Might as well be honest with each other." I set down my tablet. "Why me? That's not a complete question. Why am I the one you've decided is so important to protect? You have dozens of employees, hundreds probably. What makes me different?" Blake was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the armrest in the only sign of agitation he ever showed. Finally, he stood and moved to the bar, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey despite the early hour. "Do you remember the first day you came for your interview?" he asked, handing me a glass. I took it, the question catching me off guard. "Of course, 8 months ago. You were 15 minutes late, and your previous assistant had quit without notice. The office was chaos. She'd stolen $50,000 and disappeared." He settled into the seat beside me rather than across from me, close enough that our knees almost touched. "Did you know that?" "I suspected something like that. You were looking at her expense reports when I walked in, and your expression was—" I paused, searching for the right word. "Murderous?" "Focused. Dangerously focused." I sipped the whiskey, feeling it burn down my throat. "You barely looked at me during the interview. Just asked 3 questions and hired me on the spot. I asked what you would do if you discovered an employee was embezzling. You said you'd document everything, secure the evidence, and present it to me privately before taking any action. Then you asked if I wanted you to start with my previous assistant's accounts." The memory came back sharply. I'd been so desperate for the job, so determined not to fail, that I'd basically offered to do forensic accounting without being asked. "You'd already figured it out," Blake continued. In the 30 minutes you'd been waiting in my reception area, you'd noticed the discrepancies in the expense reports lying on your desk. You're observant, intelligent, and you don't panic under pressure. Those are rare qualities. That's why you hired me, not why you've suddenly decided I'm your responsibility. No. He swirled his whiskey, watching the liquid catch the light. That came later, about 3 months in. Do you remember the Martinelli situation? I did. Vincent Martinelli had shown up at the office drunk and belligerent, demanding to see Blake about some business deal gone wrong. Security had been tied up with a delivery issue, and I'd been alone in the outer office when he'd stumbled off the elevator. He tried to force his way into your office, I said slowly. I told him you weren't available and that he needed to leave. You told him that if he didn't leave immediately, you'd call the police and make sure every newspaper in the city knew Vincent Martinelli couldn't hold his liquor or his temper. Blake's lips curved slightly. He was twice your size and visibly aggressive, but you stood your ground. Didn't back down. Didn't show fear. I was terrified. I know. I was watching the security feed, but you didn't let him see it. And when he finally left, you calmly called security, filed a report, and went back to work like nothing had happened. You didn't come running to me for protection or reassurance. You handled it. That's my job. No, Bella. That was you being extraordinary in a situation designed to make you feel ordinary. He turned to face me fully, and the intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. That's when I realized you were different, that you weren't just another employee. You were someone worth keeping close. Worth protecting, you mean. Same thing, in my world. He reached out, his fingers finding the necklace at my throat, the gold chain sliding through his fingers like water. I protect what's valuable to me, what's mine. And you became mine that day, whether you realized it or not. The touch was intimate, possessive, and I should have pulled away, should have established boundaries. But I couldn't seem to move, pinned by his gaze and the weight of his confession. I'm not a possession, I whispered, but the protest sounded weak even to my ears. No, you're not. His thumb brushed against my collarbone, the touch feather light, but electric. You're something much more dangerous. You're someone I care about, someone whose safety matters more than strategy or profit or power. And in my world, Bella, that makes you the most valuable thing I own, even if you refuse to acknowledge the ownership. Blake, I know it's not what you want to hear. I know you value your independence, your autonomy. I'm not trying to take that from you. But I can't pretend you're just my assistant anymore. Not when every instinct I have screams at me to keep you close, to make sure nothing touches you, to destroy anyone who even looks at you wrong. The raw honesty in his voice stole my breath. This was Blake without his armor, without his careful control. This was the man beneath the mob boss, and he was letting me see him. You barely know me, I managed. What you're describing, that's not rational. That's not... Love? He smiled, but there was something sad in it. No, it's not love. Not yet. But it's the foundation of it. It's obsession and possession and a desperate need to keep you safe that I can't logic away no matter how hard I try. And before you tell me how unhealthy that is, I already know. I know I'm being irrational. I know this protectiveness is excessive. But I don't care, Bella. I stopped caring about rational the moment you stood up to a violent drunk to protect my office, and then calmly filed the paperwork like it was just another Tuesday. I didn't know what to say. Everything he was describing sounded like the beginning of something toxic, controlling, the kind of relationship I'd sworn I'd never get trapped in. And yet the way he said it, with that brutal honesty and unflinching self-awareness, it didn't feel manipulative. It felt like a confession. a warning, an invitation to run before I got in too deep. What if I want to leave? I asked quietly. What if this is too much, too fast, too intense? His hand dropped from the necklace, and something shuddered in his expression. Then you leave. I'll make sure you're protected from a distance. Make sure you're safe and secure, and have everything you need. But I won't force you to stay, Bella. I'm possessive, not monstrous. There's a difference. Is there? Because right now it feels like you're drawing me into your world whether I want it or not. I am, he admitted, because keeping you at arm's length puts you in more danger than keeping you close. But the choice to stay, to accept what I'm offering, that has to be yours. I can make a lot of things happen through force of will, but I can't make you want this. Want me. The admission hung between us, raw and vulnerable. Blake Caruso, the man who controlled an empire through fear and loyalty, was admitting he couldn't control this. Couldn't control me. Couldn't control what was growing between us. I don't know what I want, I said honestly. Everything in my life was normal and ordinary until you decided I was yours. Now I'm living in a penthouse I didn't choose, wearing your claim around my neck, and flying to Chicago for meetings I barely understand. I don't know how to process any of this. Then don't. Not yet. He stood, putting physical distance between us, and I could see the effort it took. Process it in Chicago. Process it during the meetings and the dinners and the late-night work sessions. Process it while you're safe and protected and close enough that I can sleep at night knowing no one can hurt you. And then, when we get back, tell me what you've decided. And if I decide this is too much, then I'll respect your decision. His smile was sad. And hate every moment of it, but I'll respect it. The captain announced our descent into Chicago, and Blake returned to his seat, the moment of vulnerability sliding behind his professional mask like it had never happened. But I'd seen it, felt it, and I knew things between us had fundamentally shifted. I touched the necklace again, feeling the weight of his claim and his confession. He'd laid himself bare, shown me the man beneath the monster, and given me the choice he'd claimed didn't exist. The question was, what was I going to do with it? As we landed, I caught sight of 3 black SUVs waiting on the tarmac, and my stomach dropped. Whatever meetings Blake had planned in Chicago, they were important enough to require serious security. Important enough, apparently, that he couldn't risk leaving me behind. Vincent will brief you in the car, Blake said as we descended the stairs. These meetings are more delicate than yesterday's, more dangerous too. I need you alert and aware. Can you do that? I straightened my shoulders and met his gaze steadily. I can do anything you need me to, Mr. Caruso. Something flashed in his eyes. Pride, possession, desire. Before his professional mask slammed back into place. Good. Stay close, stay quiet, and trust me. No matter what you see or hear, trust that I know what I'm doing. The SUVs waited like black beetles on the tarmac, and as I climbed into one with Blake beside me and Vincent at the wheel, I wondered what exactly I'd gotten myself into, and why, despite everything, I wasn't running. The Chicago meetings took place in a private room at an upscale steakhouse, the kind where reservations were made months in advance, and the waitstaff knew better than to ask questions about the men in expensive suits who discussed business over rare fillets and aged whiskey. Blake had warned me to stay quiet, and I'd nodded, understanding the instruction. But what I hadn't understood was how different this world looked from the inside. Yesterday's meeting with Marco Castellano had been tense but civilized. These men were something else entirely. Vincent Romano sat at the head of the table, his silver hair slicked back, and his eyes like chips of obsidian. To his right was his son, Marcus, younger than Blake by a few years, but with the same predatory stillness that marked men who'd grown up in this life. And flanking them were 4 other men whose names I didn't catch, but whose presence screamed enforcer, soldier, men who did the violent work that kept empires running. I sat slightly behind Blake, my tablet in hand, documenting everything like the good assistant I was supposed to be. But I was acutely aware of the attention on me, of eyes that lingered too long and appraised too openly. "Blake," Vincent said, raising his glass in a mock toast. "You've done well for yourself. New territories, new operations, and now," his gaze slid to me, "new acquisitions. She's lovely. Does she speak?" "When I require it." Blake's voice was cold, dismissive, but his hand found my knee under the table, a warning squeeze that said, "Stay calm, stay quiet. Miss Morgan is here to document our agreement. Nothing more." Such a waste. Marcus leaned forward, his smile all teeth. A woman like that should be enjoyed, not hidden behind a tablet taking notes. The hand on my knee tightened dangerously, and I felt Blake's body go rigid beside me. But when he spoke, his voice remained controlled. "My business is my business, Marcus. Let's focus on why we're here." Of course. Vincent waved a dismissive hand. "The waterfront properties. You want access to my distribution network, and I want assurances that your expansion won't interfere with my established operations. A fair exchange, yes?" What followed was an hour of negotiation so tense I could barely breathe. Numbers were discussed, territories mapped out, agreements made that I knew would never appear in any legal document. This was the shadow empire Blake ran, the machinery beneath the legitimate facade, and I was being given a front row seat. Halfway through, my phone buzzed with a text. I glanced down, expecting it to be from Blake's office, but the message made my blood run cold. "You look beautiful when you're scared. The necklace is a nice touch. Unknown number. Sent from inside this room." My eyes snapped up, scanning the faces around the table. Vincent and Marcus were deep in conversation with Blake. The 4 soldiers sat impassive, their expressions revealing nothing. But one of them, the one closest to the door, met my gaze for just a second before looking away. I felt Blake's attention shift to me, that 6th sense of his picking up on my distress. I showed him the phone under the table and watched his expression go from controlled to lethal in the space of a heartbeat. "Gentlemen." He stood, and every man in the room tensed. "We're done for today. Vincent, you have my proposal. Consider it overnight, and we'll reconvene tomorrow to finalize." "But we haven't finished," Marcus started. "I said we're done." Blake's voice dropped to that dangerous register that made smart men very careful. "Something has come up that requires my immediate attention. Vincent, walk me out." It wasn't a request. Vincent's eyes narrowed, but he stood, gesturing for his men to remain seated. Blake's hand found the small of my back, urging me ahead of him as we moved toward the door. I could feel eyes on us, could sense the shift in atmosphere from business negotiation to something more primal and dangerous. In the hallway outside the private room, Vincent stopped. "What's this really about? Blake?" We were close to an agreement. "Someone in your organization just threatened what's mine." Blake's voice was deadly soft. "One of your men sent my assistant a text message that crossed several very serious lines. I want to know which one, and I want to know why." Vincent's expression hardened. "My men know better than to disrespect a guest." "Apparently not." Blake showed him the phone, and I watched Vincent's face darken as he read the message. "I'll handle this. You'll do more than handle it." Blake stepped closer, and even I could feel the violence radiating off him like heat. "You'll find out which one, and you'll make an example. Because if someone in your crew thinks my assistant is fair game for intimidation, they need to learn exactly what that costs. She's just your secretary, Blake. Don't start a war over... She's mine." The two words were absolute, final. And anyone who touches what's mine dies screaming. Are we clear? The hallway went silent. Vincent studied Blake's face, then looked at me with new understanding. I see. Yes, we're clear. I'll find the man responsible and deliver his apology personally. I don't want his apology. I want his fear. Blake's hand tightened on my back. We're leaving. You have until tomorrow morning to clean your house. If I find out who sent that message before you do, I'll handle it my way. And my way tends to be permanent. Vincent nodded once, sharply, and Blake steered me toward the exit where Vincent waited with the SUV. I was shaking, I realized, tremors running through my body that I couldn't control. In the car, Blake ordered, and I obeyed, sliding into the back seat while he followed, slamming the door behind us. Vincent, the hotel. Now. Yes, sir. We pulled away from the restaurant, and Blake immediately pulled me against him, his arms coming around me in a grip that was equal parts protective and possessive. Are you hurt? No, just scared. Good. Fear is appropriate right now. His hand stroked through my hair, the gesture at odds with the fury I could feel vibrating through him. Did you recognize who sent it? One of the soldiers, the one by the door. He looked at me right after I read it. Tony Marchetti, Vincent's newest recruit. Blake's laugh was humorless. He just signed his own death warrant. Blake, you can't. I can, and I will. He pulled back to look at me, and his eyes were storm-dark with rage. You don't understand, Bella. In my world, this isn't about being possessive or jealous. This is about respect, about power. If I let this slide, if I don't respond with overwhelming force, every two-bit soldier in every crew will think you're fair game. They'll think they can use you against me. And I will burn this entire city to ash before I let that happen. The raw intensity in his voice should have terrified me, should have sent me running for the nearest exit. But instead, I felt something else. Something warm and dangerous that settled in my chest and refused to be dislodged. You're insane, I whispered. Probably. His thumb traced my lower lip, the touch sending electricity through me. But I'm your brand of insane now. You wear my necklace. You sleep in my building. You fly in my plane and sit at my meetings. Whether you want to admit it or not, Bella, you're in this. You're mine, and I protect what's mine with everything I have. This is too much. It's too intense. Too real. He leaned in closer, his forehead resting against mine. It is real. This thing between us, this pull, it's the most real thing I've felt in years. And I know it scares you. I know you want to run. But you're still here. You're still wearing my claim. Still letting me hold you. Still looking at me like you can't decide if you want to kiss me or kill me. Both, I admitted breathlessly. Definitely both. His smile was dangerous and beautiful. Good. Hate me if you need to. Fight me every step of the way. But don't leave. Don't walk away from this, from us, because you're scared of how much you feel it too. I don't. You do. His lips brushed against my jaw. Not quite a kiss, but close enough to make my breath hitch. You feel this pull, this inevitability. You felt it the moment I put this necklace on you, the moment I claimed you as mine. You can fight it, Bella, but you can't make it go away. He was right, and I hated that he was right. Somewhere between his brutal honesty and his overwhelming protectiveness, I'd stopped wanting to run. Stopped wanting my old life back. I'd started craving this intensity, this feeling of being the center of someone's world in a way that was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. What happens now? I asked quietly. Now we go to the hotel. You rest. I make some calls and ensure that Tony Marchetti regrets every decision that led him to this moment. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, gentle despite the violence in his words. And tomorrow, after Vincent has cleaned up his mess, we finish our business and go home. Back to New York, where I can keep you safer than I can here. Your world is exhausting. I know. His arms tightened around me. But it's the only world I have. And you're in it now, whether we planned it that way or not. The hotel was another show of Blake's power and wealth. The penthouse suite had 2 bedrooms, a living area larger than my old apartment, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Chicago skyline. Vincent and 2 other security personnel swept the space while Blake made call after call, his voice low and deadly as he issued orders I couldn't quite hear. I stood at the window, watching the city lights blur through my reflection, and wondered when exactly my life had veered so far off course. 6 days ago, I'd been a secretary with a crush on a handsome bodyguard. Now I was the claimed possession of a mob boss, wearing his necklace like a collar, protected by armed men, and caught in the crosshairs of whatever power struggle he was fighting. Bella. Blake's voice came from behind me, and I turned to find him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Come here. I went, because refusing felt pointless. He pulled me down onto the sofa beside him, one arm draped across my shoulders in a gesture that was becoming familiar. Vincent found him, he said quietly. Tony Marchetti is being dealt with as we speak. What does that mean? It means he'll never threaten you again. It means everyone in Vincent Romano's organization now knows exactly what happens when someone disrespects what's mine. His hand found the necklace at my throat, fingers playing with the gold chain. It means you're safe, Bella. As safe as I can make you in this world. At what cost? Whatever it takes. He turned my face toward his, and the intensity in his gaze stole my breath. There is no cost too high for your safety, no line I won't cross, no boundary I won't break. You need to understand that about me, about us. I will be the monster everyone thinks I am if it means keeping you safe. That's not healthy, Blake. No, it's not. His thumb traced my jawline. But it's honest, and I'd rather be honestly obsessed with protecting you than pretend I can be rational about your safety. I should have pulled away, should have established boundaries and demanded space, and reminded him that I was my own person, not his possession. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned into his touch, into his warmth, into the dangerous certainty of his protection. I'm tired, I admitted. I know. Go sleep. I'll be out here making sure no one disturbs you. You need sleep too. I'll sleep when I know you're safe. He pressed a kiss to my temple. Go, Bella. Rest. Tomorrow we finish this business and go home. Home. He said it like it was a place we shared, a sanctuary we'd built together. And as I made my way to the bedroom and collapsed onto the bed still wearing his necklace, I realized that maybe it was. Maybe, somehow, I'd found home in the most dangerous place possible, in Blake Caruso's possessive, protective, utterly obsessed heart. I woke to the sound of Blake's voice, low and dangerous, speaking rapid Italian into his phone. The bedroom door was cracked open, and through it, I could see him pacing the living area, his shirt unbuttoned and his hair disheveled in a way I'd never seen. He looked less like the controlled mob boss, and more like a man barely containing violence. My phone showed 3:47 a.m. I'd been asleep for maybe 3 hours. I slipped out of bed, still wearing the clothes I'd collapsed in, and padded to the door. Blake's back was to me, but his reflection in the window showed an expression that made my blood run cold. Fury, barely leashed. Don't care what his family says, Blake was saying, his Italian too fast and fluid for me to follow entirely. He threatened her. He made her afraid. That has consequences. Yes, permanent ones. I don't repeat myself, Vincent. He ended the call and stood there for a moment, his shoulders tight with tension. Then, without turning around, "You should be sleeping. Hard to sleep when you're planning someone's murder in the next room." I moved to stand beside him at the window. "Is he dead? Does it matter?" "Yes. It matters that you killed someone because they scared me with a text message." Blake finally looked at me, and the emptiness in his eyes was almost worse than the rage. "He didn't just scare you, Bella. He marked you as a target. He showed everyone in that room that he thought you were vulnerable, available, weak. If I let that stand, 10 more just like him would try the same thing. Or worse. So you killed him to make a point." "I killed him to keep you alive." His voice was flat, matter of fact. "In my world, mercy is interpreted as weakness, and weakness gets people killed. Would you rather I show mercy to a man who threatened you, or show strength that keeps others from trying?" I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him there had to be another way, a less violent solution. But I'd seen enough of his world in the past few days to know he was probably right. These men understood power and fear, not compassion or reason. "I don't know how to process this," I admitted quietly. "Any of this. You, us, the violence. The fact that you're standing here telling me you killed a man like you're discussing the weather. I'm not asking you to process it. I'm asking you to accept it." He turned to face me fully, and the intensity was back in his eyes, burning away the emptiness. "This is who I am, Bella. I run an empire built on fear and loyalty. I make decisions that cost lives. I do terrible things to terrible people, and I sleep just fine afterward because those terrible things keep the people I care about safe. And I'm one of those people now. You're the only person." The confession was raw, unguarded. Everyone else is business, strategy, assets to be managed. But you. He reached out, his fingers finding the necklace at my throat. "You're something else entirely. Something I didn't plan for and can't control, and it's driving me insane. Blake, do you have any idea what it's like?" He moved closer, backing me against the window, his body caging mine without touching. "To suddenly care about someone's safety more than your own? To lie awake at night, cataloging every possible threat, every vulnerability, every way someone could hurt them? To know that the only thing standing between them and a world full of predators is you and your willingness to be the biggest monster in the room?" His vulnerability was as disarming as his violence. I reached up, my hand cupping his jaw, feeling the stubble rough against my palm. "I didn't ask for this, for you to care this much." "I know." But it happened anyway. He leaned into my touch like a man starving for gentleness. "And now I can't uncaring, Bella. I can't go back to seeing you as just my assistant. I can't pretend you're not the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing before I sleep. I can't pretend that the thought of anyone hurting you doesn't make me want to burn the world down. That's obsession, not love. I know the difference." His hand covered mine against his face. "And this started as obsession, I won't lie. But it's becoming something more. Something that terrifies me because I've never felt it before, and I don't know how to control it." "You can't control feelings, Blake. That's the point. I control everything else." His smile was self-deprecating. "Territories, operations, men who'd kill at my command. But I can't control this. Can't control you. And instead of frustrating me, it's..." He paused, searching for words. "It's freeing. Terrifying and freeing at the same time. I should have been running. Should have been calling the police or my family, or anyone who could extract me from this increasingly dangerous situation. But I couldn't seem to move, pinned by his confession and my own traitorous heart. "What do you want from me?" I whispered. "Everything." His forehead dropped to rest against mine. "I want you to stop fighting this. Stop pretending you don't feel it too. Stop lying to yourself about what's happening between us. And what is happening between us? You're falling for me. His voice was soft but certain. Just like I've already fallen for you. You're just too stubborn to admit it yet. That's presumptuous. It's observant. His lips brushed my temple, not quite a kiss. You could have demanded to go home after that text message. Could have quit. Could have walked away from all of this. But you're still here, Bella. Still wearing my necklace. Still letting me hold you. Still looking at me like you can't decide if I'm your salvation or your downfall. Maybe you're both. Maybe I am. He pulled back enough to meet my eyes. But I'd rather be both than nothing at all. The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. He was right. I was falling for him, had been falling since the moment he'd put his necklace around my throat and claimed me as his. Despite the violence, despite the danger, despite every logical reason to run, I was choosing to stay. This is insane, I breathed. Completely. His smile was almost boyish. But it's ours. Our brand of insanity. Before I could respond, his phone rang. He answered it with a curt, "What?" Then listened, his expression darkening. When? How many? And Romano knows? Good. Increase security at the hotel. Nobody gets up here without my explicit clearance. Yes, I mean nobody. Not housekeeping. Not room service. Nobody. He ended the call and immediately made another. It's me. I need eyes on the entire block. If anyone suspicious so much as looks at this hotel, I want to know about it. Also, move up our departure. We're leaving Chicago in 2 hours, not this afternoon. What's wrong? I asked as soon as he hung up. Vincent's crew is in chaos. After Tony Marchetti was dealt with, 3 others decided to make a play for his territory. It's turned into an internal war, which means the streets are unpredictable right now. We're leaving before it gets worse. You said 2 hours. It's 4 in the morning. I know. Pack what you need. We're going to the airport now. He was already moving, grabbing his jacket, checking his gun with a practiced efficiency that should have frightened me but somehow didn't. Vincent, get the cars ready. Full security detail. I want eyes on every approach. I hurried back to the bedroom, throwing my few belongings into my bag with shaking hands. Through the open door, I could hear Blake making more calls, his voice calm but commanding as he orchestrated our escape from a city that had suddenly become hostile territory. 20 minutes later, we were in the elevator heading down to the underground parking garage. Blake had positioned himself between me and the doors, one hand resting on the gun beneath his jacket. Vincent and 2 other security personnel flanked us, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. The garage was dimly lit and eerily quiet. Our 3 SUVs waited in formation, engines already running. Blake's hand found the small of my back, urging me forward toward the middle vehicle. That's when I saw him. Bryce, Blake's head of security, leaning against the SUV with a casual ease that seemed wrong in the tense atmosphere. He straightened as we approached, his handsome face breaking into a smile. Boss, didn't expect you to be leaving so early. Change of plans. Blake's voice was neutral, but I felt his body tense beside me. What are you doing here, Bryce? You're supposed to be in New York. Got a call that you might need extra security. Thought I'd fly out, make sure everything was handled properly. His eyes slid to me, lingering just a second too long. Miss Morgan, you look well. Chicago agrees with you. Thank you, I managed, though something about his presence felt off. Wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. Blake's hand tightened on my back, almost painful. Bella, get in the car. Now. The command in his voice made me move without thinking. I climbed into the back seat, watching through the tinted window as Blake pulled Bryce aside, their conversation too low for me to hear. But I could read their body language, Blake's aggressive posture, Bryce's defensive stance, the tension crackling between them. Vincent slid into the driver's seat, catching my eye in the rearview mirror. "Everything okay, Miss Morgan?" "I don't know. Is it?" He was quiet for a moment, then. "Mr. Caruso doesn't trust easily. If he's questioning Bryce's presence, there's a reason." Blake returned to the car, his expression unreadable as he slid in beside me. "Let's go, now." The convoy moved out, and I watched Bryce standing alone in the garage, something in his expression making my skin crawl. As we pulled away, I saw him pull out his phone, typing rapidly. "Blake, something about that felt wrong." "I know." His jaw was tight. Bryce wasn't supposed to know we were in Chicago. I specifically kept our travel plans limited to essential personnel only. The fact that he showed up here, at 4 a.m, means someone told him. Someone who shouldn't have. "You think he's... what? Spying on you?" "I think he's being paid by someone to keep tabs on me. On us." He pulled out his own phone, typing quickly. "I'm having him followed. If he makes contact with anyone unexpected, I'll know." The flight back to New York was tense. Blake spent most of it on calls, his Italian flowing too fast for me to follow, but the anger in his voice was universal. I tried to work, tried to focus on the documents he'd asked me to review, but my mind kept returning to Bryce's smile, the way his eyes had lingered on me, the wrongness of his presence. "He's the one, isn't he?" I said suddenly, interrupting one of Blake's calls. "Bryce is working for someone against you." Blake ended the call and looked at me, and I saw confirmation in his eyes. "We don't have proof yet, but yes, I believe so. The question is who he's working for and how much they know." "About your business?" "About you." He pulled me closer, his arm around my shoulders, protective and possessive. "If they know you matter to me, Bella, you become a target. The best way to destroy a man like me is to take what he values most." "Then maybe I should leave. Go somewhere safe until..." "No." The word was absolute. "You stay with me, where I can protect you, where I can see you and know you're safe. Anyone who wants to hurt you will have to go through me first. And I promise you, Bella, that's not a fight they'll win." By the time we landed in New York, Blake had made arrangements for my security to be tripled. When we pulled up to my building, his building, I corrected mentally, there were 2 new guards in the lobby and another stationed on my floor. "This is excessive," I protested, as Blake walked me to my door, his security team sweeping the apartment before allowing us inside. "This is necessary." He pulled me into the apartment, closing the door and backing me against it in one smooth motion. "Someone in my organization is betraying me. Someone who has access to information about my schedule, my movements, my vulnerabilities. Until I find out who and eliminate the threat, you stay locked down. Understand?" "Blake, promise me." His hands framed my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. "Promise me you won't leave this building without security. Promise me you'll be careful, cautious, paranoid even. Promise me, Bella." The desperation in his voice broke something in me. "I promise." "Good." He kissed me then, hard and possessive and desperate, pouring all his fear and fury and need into that single contact. When he pulled back, we were both breathing hard. "I have to go. I have meetings, people to threaten, a traitor to find. But I'll be back tonight. Don't open this door for anyone but me or Vincent. Not even if they say they're security. Especially not if they say they're Bryce. Okay? I mean it, Bella. Trust no one but me." He left, and I locked the door behind him, engaging all 3 deadbolts with shaking hands. The apartment felt suddenly too large, too quiet, too vulnerable despite the guards stationed outside. I made coffee, tried to work, paced the living room like a caged animal. My phone buzzed with a text from Blake. "Thinking about you. Stay safe. Stay mine." I touched the necklace at my throat, his claim that had become comfort, and typed back, "Always." Because that's what I'd become, I realized. His. Completely, irrevocably his. And instead of terrifying me, it felt like coming home. Even if home was the most dangerous place I could possibly be. 3 days passed in relative calm, which should have been my first warning. Blake worked from home, conducting meetings from his study while I organized his affairs from the dining table, always within eyesight. We fell into a domestic rhythm that felt both surreal and natural. Breakfast together, working in companionable silence. Dinners where we talked about everything except the violence simmering beneath the surface of his world. On the 4th day, Blake had to leave for a meeting he couldn't conduct remotely. 2 hours maximum, he promised, kissing my forehead at the door. Vincent stays with you. Don't leave the apartment. I know the drill. But an hour after he left, Vincent's phone rang. He answered, listened, his expression darkening. I need to check something in the security office downstairs. 5 minutes. Lock the door behind me. Blake said, I know what he said, but there's a situation with the cameras on this floor, and I need to verify it's just a technical glitch. He was already moving toward the door. Lock this. Don't open it for anyone but me or Mr. Caruso. The door closed behind him, and I engaged all the locks. The apartment felt suddenly too quiet, the silence pressing against my ears. I returned to the dining table, trying to focus on the contract I was reviewing, but unease crawled up my spine. My phone buzzed. Blake. Everything okay? Vincent had to check the security cameras. Said there's a glitch. The response was immediate. Get out, now. That's not a glitch, it's a blind spot. Someone's creating access. Vincent wouldn't leave you alone unless... The power went out, plunging the apartment into darkness. My heart stopped. The emergency lighting should have kicked in immediately, but nothing. Complete darkness except for the city lights filtering through the windows. A sound at the door. Not knocking. Something else. Metal on metal. Someone picking the locks. I ran for the bedroom, my phone clutched in my hand, typing frantically to Blake. Someone's breaking in. The bedroom door had a lock, flimsy, but better than nothing. I engaged it, backing toward the window. 17 floors up. No escape that way. The apartment door crashed open. Multiple footsteps, heavy boots on hardwood. Not trying to be quiet anymore. Miss Morgan. The voice was familiar, smooth, apologetic. Please don't make this difficult. Bryce. My hand found the panic button by the bed, slamming it repeatedly. But if the power was out, would it even work? The panic system runs on separate circuits, Bryce said, as if reading my mind. But we've disabled those too. No one's coming, Bella. Not in time. The bedroom door shuddered under impact. Once. Twice. The frame splintered on the 3rd hit, and then he was there. Bryce, Blake's head of security, my supposed protector, standing in the doorway with 2 men I didn't recognize. I'm sorry about this, he said, and he actually sounded regretful. You seem nice, but you're worth a lot of money to the right people, and Blake Caruso has made a lot of enemies. Blake will kill you. My voice was steadier than I expected. He'll hunt you down and destroy everyone you've ever cared about. Probably. Bryce nodded to his men. That's why I'll be in Rio by morning. But first, we need to deliver you to some people who want to have a conversation with your boyfriend about territory and respect. They moved fast. One grabbed my arms while the other produced a cloth, pressing it over my face. I struggled, tried to scream, but the chemical smell overwhelmed me. The world blurred, tilted, went dark. I woke in the back of a moving van, my hands zip-tied, my head pounding. How long had I been out? Minutes? Hours? Through the front windshield, I could see we were in an industrial area, abandoned warehouses and empty lots. The kind of place where screams wouldn't matter. "She's awake," one of the men said. Bryce glanced back from the passenger seat. "We're almost there. Romano's people are waiting. Once the exchange is made, we're done. Clean and simple." Romano. Vincent Romano from Chicago. This had been his play all along. The van stopped outside a warehouse with broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. They pulled me out, my legs unsteady, and dragged me inside. The interior was cavernous and dark except for portable lights set up in the center, illuminating a space where several men waited. Vincent Romano himself stood in the center, flanked by his son Marcus, and at least 6 armed men. He smiled when he saw me. "Miss Morgan, we meet again under less pleasant circumstances." He nodded to Bryce. "Well done. Your payment will be transferred as discussed." "Pleasure doing business." Bryce turned to leave, and rage burned through my fear. "You're a coward," I spat. "Blake trusted you. He gave you everything, and you sold him out for money." Bryce paused. "Blake Caruso gives nothing. He takes, controls, possesses. I was his employee, not his family. The Romano family offered me something better. Freedom and enough money to disappear. I'd be a fool not to take it." "You'll be a dead fool when Blake finds you." "If he finds me." Bryce glanced at Vincent. "You're sure your plan will work?" "Blake Caruso is predictable when it comes to her." Vincent approached me, gripping my chin roughly. "He'll come for her. Alone, desperate, vulnerable. And when he does, we'll end his empire and take everything he's built. All because he was stupid enough to care about his secretary." The warehouse door exploded inward. Blake stood in the entrance. Backlit by emergency vehicle lights, Vincent beside him and at least 20 armed men fanning out behind him. But it was Blake who commanded every eye. Blake in his black suit with blood spattered across his shirt, his gun raised, his expression absolutely lethal. "Let her go." Each word was a death sentence. Vincent's men raised their weapons, but Blake's were faster, already in position. Mexican standoff. Except Blake looked like a man with nothing to lose and everything to destroy. "Blake." Vincent's smile was cold. "Predictable as always. We have a proposal. I don't negotiate with dead men." Blake's eyes found mine across the space. "Bella, close your eyes." I obeyed instantly. Gunfire erupted. Screams, shouts, the sound of bodies hitting concrete. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, but felt like eternity. Then silence. "Bella, it's over. Open your eyes." Blake was there, cutting through my zip ties with a knife, pulling me against him with shaking hands. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you? I swear to God if they—" "I'm okay. Scared, but okay." I clung to him, unable to stop trembling. "Bryce, he—" "I know. I figured it out about 30 seconds after Vincent left you. He was the leak, feeding Romano information about our movements." Blake's arms tightened around me. "He's not getting away, Bella. None of them are." I looked over his shoulder. Vincent Romano lay motionless, his son beside him. Most of the soldiers were down or surrendering to Blake's men. And Bryce. Bryce was on his knees, Vincent holding a gun to his head, waiting for Blake's order. "Please," Bryce begged. "Blake, I'm sorry. They offered me so much money. I needed—" "You needed nothing I didn't already give you." Blake's voice was ice. "Loyalty, respect, opportunity. But you chose betrayal. You chose to threaten what's mine. She's just—" "Finish that sentence, and I'll make your death last days instead of seconds." Blake pressed a kiss to my temple. "She's everything. Everything you're not. Everything you'll never understand." He turned to Vincent. "Make it quick. He doesn't deserve to suffer. He just deserves to be forgotten." The gunshot made me flinch, but Blake's arms kept me steady. When I finally looked, Bryce was gone. His betrayal ended. It's done, Blake said softly. You're safe. They're all gone. No more threats. You came for me. My voice broke. You walked into a trap for me. I'd walk into hell itself for you. He cupped my face, his thumbs wiping away tears I hadn't realized were falling. Don't you understand yet, Bella? You're not just mine. I'm yours. Completely, irrevocably yours. You own my heart, my loyalty, my soul. I would destroy the world or myself to keep you safe. That's insane. That's love. His smile was soft, genuine, nothing like the cold mask he showed the world. I love you, Bella Morgan. I've loved you since you stood up to a drunk to protect my office. I loved you when you called Bryce handsome and made me realize I couldn't stand anyone else looking at you. I love you now, terrified and brave and absolutely perfect. I love you too. The words came easier than I expected. Even though you're possessive and overprotective and absolutely terrifying sometimes, I love you, Blake. I choose you. I choose this, us, all of it. He kissed me then, desperate and claiming and gentle all at once. And in that warehouse surrounded by the wreckage of his enemies, I finally understood what he'd been trying to tell me all along. This was his world. Violent, dangerous, unforgiving. But in the center of it, there was us. There was safety and devotion and a love so fierce it would burn down cities and end empires. I was his, and he was mine. Forever. I adjusted my dress, the emerald green one that Blake said matched my eyes, and surveyed my new office. Not secretary's desk anymore. Not assistant's workspace. But a full executive office on the floor below Blake's, with my name on the door. Bella Morgan Caruso, Chief Operating Officer. We'd married quietly 2 weeks after the warehouse. Just us, Vincent as witness, and a judge who owed Blake a favor. No big ceremony, no elaborate reception. Just vows spoken in Blake's study with his grandmother's ring on my finger, and his claim finally, legally binding. The business had been reorganized, the Romano territories absorbed, the traitors eliminated. And Blake had shocked everyone by giving me real power, real authority over the legitimate operations, while he handled the shadows. You're the only person I trust completely, he'd said. The only one who sees all of me and loves me anyway. If anyone's going to help me build something better, it's you. A knock at my door. Blake entered without waiting for permission, as always, crossing to pull me into his arms. How's my wife? He nuzzled my neck, his hand settling possessively on my waist. Your wife has 3 meetings this afternoon, and doesn't have time for whatever you're planning. I'm not planning anything. He was absolutely planning something. I just wanted to see you. Is that a crime? From you? Usually, yes. I turned in his arms, looping my hands behind his neck. What do you really want? You. Always you. His smile was pure wickedness. But specifically, I want you to clear your schedule tonight. I have plans. What kind of plans? The kind that involve you, me, our apartment, and absolutely no interruptions. He kissed me thoroughly. The kind where I remind you exactly why you chose to marry a possessive, overprotective mob boss. I married you because I love you, not because you're possessive. You love me because I'm possessive. He grinned. Admit it, Bella. You love that I'm obsessed with you, that I'd destroy anyone who threatens you, that you're the center of my world. Maybe, I admitted. Or maybe I just love that underneath all the danger and darkness. You're mine. Completely mine. Always. He pressed his forehead to mine. You made me human again, Bella. Made me feel something besides rage and control. You're my everything. Took you long enough to admit it, boss. He laughed, that genuine sound I'd grown to treasure. Don't call me boss. You're not my employee anymore. You're my partner, my equal, my wife. And your obsession? That too. He kissed me again, slower this time. Now clear your schedule. I plan to spend tonight reminding you exactly what you signed up for when you married me. As he left, I touched the necklace at my throat, his first claim, and smiled. This was my life now. Power and danger and a love so consuming it had reshaped both of us. I'd walked into his office a secretary with simple dreams. I'd walked out his wife, his partner, his everything. And I'd never been happier.